Utes after Jonathan and Suzy pressed publish on their announcement, the atmosphere began to shift. Quietly at first. A pulse. A tremor. Something small enough to ignore but too real to dismiss. And then, before anyone inside the Daystar family could catch their breath, the reactions began. From room to room. From phone to phone. From heart to heart. What started as a single announcement suddenly became the spark that lit a fire no one was prepared to manage. A fire that revealed fractures, fears, secrets, loyalties, and emotions that had been sitting silently beneath the surface for far too long. 4 years, Jonathan and Suzy had lived under the weight of expectations. Ministry roles, family responsibilities, public image, spiritual legacy. Everyone saw them as steady, kind, graceful. They were the couple that held themselves together even when everything around them felt like it was falling apart. They were the soft voices in a loud room, the calm in the storm, the gentle presence in a world of pressure. But the one thing people never saw was the cost. The toll. The emotional strain of always being the strong ones. And the burden of carrying a story that wasn't fully theirs to tell. When they finally stepped away from Daystar, they did it quietly. No dramatic speeches. No accusations. No public explanations. Just silence, a silence filled with the kind of heartbreak only people close to them could truly understand. They didn't leave to escape. They left to breathe. They left to heal. They left to protect what was left of themselves. And more than anything, they left because their hearts whispered something they'd been trying to ignore for too long. You were called to something new. 4 months afterward, the world waited. Supporters watched their pages, hoping for an update. Critics kept an eye out, looking for signs of conflict. Insiders leaned forward, wondering what the couple would do next. But Jonathan and Suzy didn't rush. They didn't stumble into their new season. They prayed through it. They wrestled through it. They held each other through it. And slowly, the pieces began to come together. Small pieces at first, then larger ones, until finally, the vision became clear. A new ministry. Not connected to Daystar. Not controlled by anyone else. Not supervised, shaped, or restricted. A ministry born from healing. A ministry built from authenticity. A ministry rooted in obedience rather than approval. When they posted their announcement, they expected support. They expected curiosity. But what they didn't expect, what they could never have prepared for, was the reaction inside the Daystar family. A reaction that was far more emotional than anyone on the outside realized. A reaction that exposed everything the family had been holding in since the day Jonathan and Suzy walked away. It began with a phone call. A short one. A simple one. A voice trembling just enough to betray something more beneath the surface. Did you know? A pause. A shaky breath. A moment filled with more emotion than the words themselves. Yes. I knew it was coming. The reply wasn't angry. It wasn't accusatory. It was wounded. The kind of wounded that comes from feeling left out. From feeling surprised. From feeling like something important had been done without your presence, your awareness, your blessing. And even though Jonathan had never intended to cause pain, the ripple had already begun. A second call came just minutes later. This one was longer. Not angry, but concerned, deeply, overwhelmingly concerned. The kind of concern that masks fear. The kind that wraps itself in spiritual language, hoping to soften the blow. Are you sure this is the right time? Are you sure this is the right move? Are you sure you're ready for what comes with this? Questions layered in love and fear, and something else Jonathan and Suzy recognized but chose not to address. Because they knew the truth behind those words. They knew the questions weren't really asking about the calling. They were asking about the consequences. A ministry outside of Daystar meant something profound, something unspoken yet undeniably clear. Jonathan and Suzy were not coming back. And that reality, for some family members, was too much to bear. Within an hour, the tension escalated. Text messages were sent. Screenshots shared. Comments monitored. Observations whispered in private group chats. The kind of chatter that spreads quickly when people are nervous. The kind that reveals what someone truly feels when they think no one is watching. Why didn't they tell us everything? Why didn't they ask us first? What if people start asking why they left again? What if this brings up the past? What if their ministry grows too fast? What if they say something that reflects badly on the family? Fear speaks louder than truth when it has something to lose. And inside the Daystar circle, fear was gaining volume. But the reaction that shook Jonathan and Suzy the most came not from a sibling, not from a distant relative, not from a staff member, but from someone close. Someone with influence. Someone whose voice carried weight in conversations that mattered. Someone who had always expected Jonathan to follow their lead. Their message wasn't subtle. So this is what you decided to do, without us. That sentence was a storm disguised as a whisper. A quiet dagger. A gentle sentence carrying the sharpness of betrayal. It wasn't about ministry. It wasn't about calling. It wasn't about direction. It was about control. Jonathan read it twice. A third time. Then a fourth. And each time, the weight grew heavier, not because he doubted his decision, but because he now saw what the announcement had revealed. It exposed the one thing he had been afraid to admit. Some people were more committed to his role than to his freedom. Suzy saw the hurt in his eyes and placed her hand on his shoulder. She didn't have to say anything. Her silence spoke peace, strength, support. The kind of support Jonathan had been missing for years inside the ministry world. The kind of support that made their new calling feel more like destiny than risk. Meanwhile, the storm inside the Daystar family grew louder. One family member questioned the timing. Another questioned the motive. Another questioned the message behind the message. And another expressed something that shocked everyone who heard it. They're going to take people with them. That's when the truth surfaced. The tension wasn't about the ministry. It wasn't about the announcement. It wasn't even about the family dynamics. It was about fear of influence shifting. Fear of narratives changing. Fear of people choosing Jonathan and Suzy over the Daystar brand. Fear that the public might begin asking deeper questions again. Fear that the truth, whatever that truth may be, might finally rise. But while the tension grew, something else grew even faster. Support. Hundreds of comments. Messages of love. Prayers. Gratitude. People saying they had been waiting for this moment. People saying they felt peace from the announcement. People saying Jonathan and Suzy always carried something special, something pure, something authentic that they missed seeing. One comment stood out more than all the others. This feels more genuine than anything we've seen in a long time. Those words traveled fast. They landed in places no one expected. They reached ears that didn't want to hear them. And they set off emotional alarms inside the Daystar circle. Because authenticity reveals what pretending tries to hide. By evening, the tension had transformed into something heavier. Something closer to panic. Not chaotic panic, but quiet panic. Controlled panic. The kind that hides behind polite messages and measured tones. The kind that tries to maintain image while internally scrambling to maintain control. Whispers turned into conversations. Conversations turned into strategy. Strategy turned into worry. If their ministry grows more. If people start asking again. If loyalties shift. If the narrative changes. Questions that reveal more truth than the answers ever could. Meanwhile, Jonathan and Suzy stayed calm. They stayed prayerful. They stayed focused. They stayed together. Because they knew something the rest of the family had not yet realized. When God opens a new chapter, the old one loses its grip. Still, the pressure wasn't easing. If anything, it was climbing, reaching the one person inside the family whose reaction mattered most. The one person who held influence over the others. The one person whose opinion had the power to shift the atmosphere. And when they finally spoke, everything changed. Their reaction wasn't measured. It wasn't diplomatic. It wasn't even masked with spiritual softness. It was emotional, sharp, heavy, honest. If they keep doing this, the real story will come out. A sentence that echoed through every corner of the family dynamic. A sentence that revealed the truth behind the tension. A sentence that confirmed what Jonathan and Suzy always sensed but never confronted. Someone inside the family was afraid of the truth. Not afraid of the ministry. Not afraid of losing influence. Not afraid of public perception. Afraid of what would happen if Jonathan and Suzy ever decided to speak openly. But the most shocking part wasn't the fear. It was the implication. Whatever the real story is, this family member does not want it revealed. Jonathan and Suzy read the reaction. They felt the weight. But they didn't break. They didn't panic. They didn't pause their ministry. Because when God calls you forward, even fear cannot pull you backward. As the night settled and the last messages slowed, Jonathan stepped outside. The air was cool. Quiet. Still. The kind of stillness that feels like a turning point. Suzy joined him, standing shoulder to shoulder, looking up at the sky the way they did on the nights they prayed for clarity. "This is the beginning," Jonathan whispered. Suzy nodded. And beginnings always shake what was never secure. Then Jonathan said something that would define everything that came next. "We're not fighting them. We're freeing ourselves." The tension inside the Daystar family is real. The reactions are growing. The emotions are rising. But the story is only just beginning. And the next move, the one that will alter everything, won't come from Jonathan, won't come from Suzy. It will come from the family member whose fear is now louder than their silence. And when they make their move, the truth they've been trying to hide will finally step into the light. You're going to want to see what happens next.